I remember it as almost being depressing. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad was recently back from the service and starting his own business. It seems like, I know, we're trying to make ends meet, and I was the oldest, and I think my dad wanted a boy because I know this is weird, but I remember as soon as I was old enough practically to walk, he wanted he would let me stay up at night to watch the boxing matches with him. And as soon as I could fit my hand into a glove, he bought me a pair of boxing gloves and gave me boxing lessons. My brothers came along, and he used to, he thought this was great sport, and he trained me better than the boys, so that I could beat the boys up. They were younger, but I could. I was supposed to be a lady. I can remember having black patent shoes and little white socks, and I had to wear white gloves. We went to church every Sunday, and I had to wear dresses and gloves. Later, when I went to school, it was Catholic school, and I was taught that a lady is always a lady, and that I was always to be a lady, and that meant no, not to play with horseplay. I wanted to be a tomboy. I wanted to go out and climb trees and hike in the woods and do the things that the boys did, but I was somewhat limited in being able to do that. I went to Catholic school with all girls, and I was isolated from the boys, and we had long, strenuous discipline regiments almost to teach us patience, just how to be a lady and how to be feminine, waiting in lines, no talking in lines, prayer vigils, things like that. And of course, you always had to wear a hat in church. Mm-hmm. A lot of things were off limits. Like I said, playing with the boys was off limits. I remember I wanted a pair of high heel sneakers. They're back in style now, but at that time they were only in style for boys, and girls, little girls just didn't wear things like that. They had to be feminine and do the things that girls do. Where my brothers were out playing ball, I couldn't do that. But it was fine for me to play house with the girls. I remember we would build what we thought were pretty major doll houses in our basements and play dolls, and that was fine. We weren't allowed to go out and do the fun things that the boys were doing. We were expected to stay around the home, learn how to do the things around the home, learn how to do the baking, the cookies, the bread, the pies, all of it. And I, by the way, I do not cook at all now. But those were the things that we were expected to do, and it was fine to play with the dolls, but it always had to be known where we were. We couldn't be off where it was unknown, because there was a lot more supervision for girls at that time. I resented it. I wanted the freedom that my brothers had. Even though my brothers were younger, they definitely had more freedom, and I didn't have it, and it used to make me angry. I had 4 choices of things that I could be when I grew up. I could be a teacher, a nurse, a stewardess, or a secretary. I couldn't go into things that dealt with medicine. I couldn't go into law. I couldn't go into the real professions. it was extremely limiting, and of course the overall goal was to find a husband, um, get married, have children, and live with a white picket fence. It was extremely limited, and that was very, very frustrating. Um, I didn't really like those options, but girls didn't do other things. Of course, I could have been a nun, but that to me wasn't an option either. One thing I remember feeling is why why do well in school? It doesn't really matter because school is something that I have to endure for 12 years. Um, College was an option if I wanted it, not something that my parents were pushing because they fully expected that after high school I would get married and have children. And I almost did that. I came very, very close to marrying my high school sweetheart and living in that type of situation. But somehow I was able to break away from that. It made me feel very limited and I guess almost frustrated because to me it was not acceptable. These options were clearly female dominated professions and just not acceptable to me at the time. It made me almost angry and that I wanted to break out of that mold. And I didn't know how to do it. It was frustrating. I didn't have any way to go about doing that I knew of at that time. My family didn't understand these frustrations, and probably in part because I didn't voice them. It was not something that a little girl did. Little girls, and I heard this, if I heard it once, I heard it 100 times, little girls are to be seen and not heard. And it was not something that a little girl did to go around complaining and say, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, because this was my lot in life, having been born a girl at that time, and it was just what was expected, and I should accept it and be quiet about it. I think being a teenage girl at that time was painful in that as all teenagers do, you're trying to break out of the role model. And at that time, there really weren't any role models that you could look to for how to do that. So you had to do it in your own way, whatever that was. And I guess dating boys was one way that I could do it. I started dating at 11, much to my mother's dismay, and really, I mean, she was pretty horrified about that, but and there were a lot of restrictions put on it. But she did allow me to date someone at 11, and that was one way that I could break away. Another way that I used was I found that, and by this time my family was making pretty good money, I found that I could take Daddy's shopping cards, and I could charge things, and I could spend money without really having anybody there. So as a teenager, I used to use that, and the only thing he ever said to me was, "You have to stop spending so much money," and I'd say fine and go out and do it, and he would pay the bills. I remember the dating experience at that time being frustrating. The girl could not call the boy. I used to do it anyway. Whenever I could find a phone where there was no adult around, I had another girlfriend, and she and I used to get together for the purpose of calling boys. And it was totally something that was taboo at that time. But, sometimes if you didn't do that, then, you wouldn't be noticed. The rules for dating at that time were extremely limited. I had to be picked up by the boy and one of his parents, and the parent would have to call my parents beforehand and say that they were in fact going to come and pick us up. They would pick us up. The boy would come into the house, meet my mother. My dad usually wasn't home at that time, and I would have to let them know exactly where I was going, what time the dance started, what time the dance ended, and I would have to be home immediately after the dance ended. If it was a private party, my mother would want the name of the person giving the party so that she could in fact call and make sure that everything was okay and that we were being properly chaperoned.
Did you always play by the rules?
Absolutely not. I can remember one time, especially not playing by the rules. I was about 16 years old, I guess, and I had a steady boyfriend. And we had made the mistake. I had a very strict curfew. I had to be home at 12:30 on the weekends, and I could only go out one weekend night anyway, and not at all on school nights. But we had come home at 1 o'clock, and that was absolutely terrible, the most awful thing I could have done. My parents were both waiting for us. They told me that I was grounded for 3 years. I could never see this particular boy again, and that he had to leave right now. Well, that was not satisfactory with either me or the boyfriend. So we told his parents, who were a lot more liberal than mine, what had happened, and they thought it was a little extreme also. So his parents agreed to loan him the other car, the other family car, which my parents had not seen. And he also borrowed his dad's hat. At that time, men always wore top hats. And my boyfriend began picking me up in the other car with this hat on, and I had a lot of babysitting jobs. And they never caught on. So